example of page 572. Question. When it comes to those who maintain that the Lotus Sutra is superior to the true word teachings, should they try to make use of these commentaries by Jikaku, or should they reject them? And again, Jikaku is a later priest of the Tentai school. Okay? When it comes to those, or Dingyo, pardon me, they follow Dingyo. When it comes to those who maintain that the Lotus Sutra is superior to the true word teachings, should they try to make use of these commentaries by Jikaku, or should they reject them? Answer. Shakyamuni Buddha laid down a rule for future conduct when he said that we should rely on the law and not upon persons. Bodhisattva Nagarjuna says that one should rely on treatises that are faithful to the sutras, but not on those that distort the sutras. Tentai states that that which accords with the sutra is to be written down and made available, but put no faith in anything that in word or meaning fails to do so. And the great teacher Dingyo said, depending upon the preachings of the Buddha and depend upon the preachings of the Buddha and do not put faith in traditions handed down orally. If one attends such statements in the sutras, treatises, and commentaries, then one should not make dreams a basis for evaluating the Buddha's teachings. Rather, one should pay a particular attention to those sutras and treatises that make clear the relative superiority of the Lotus Sutra and the Mahavajrana Sutra. As for the assertion that the eye-opening ceremony for wooden and painted images cannot be carried out without the use of true word mudras and mantras, this is the sheerest nonsense. Are we to suppose that before the true word school appeared on the scene, wooden and painted Buddhist images could not be consecrated? In the period before the appearance of the true word school, there were wooden and painted images in India, China, and Japan that walked about or preached the teachings or spoke out loud. It would rather appear that since people have begun to use true word mudras and mantras in consecrating the Buddha images, the effectiveness of the ceremony has been completely lost. This is a generally acknowledged point. I would merely like to say that when it comes to determining the truth of the great teacher Jikaku's assertions, there is no need for me, Nichiren, to cite any outside evidence to refute them. We have only to examine Jikaku's own interpretations to understand the truth of the matter, that he's mistaken. Question, how do we come to understand it? Answer, we understand it when we realize that the source of Jikaku's delusion was the dream that he had after he had written his commentaries asserting that the true word teachings are superior to the Lotus Sutra. If his dream had been an auspicious one, then we would have to conclude that Jikaku was correct in claiming that the true word teachings are superior. But can a dream of shooting the sun be called auspicious? Just try to find anywhere in all the 5,000 or 7,000 volumes of Buddhist scriptures or in the 3,000 and more volumes of non-Buddhist literature any evidence suggesting that to dream of shooting the sun is an auspicious occurrence. Let us look at a few pieces of evidence. King Ajatashatru dreamed that the moon was falling out of the sky. When he consulted his high minister Jivaka, the latter said, "This is a sign of the Buddha's passing." And when Subhadra also dreamed that the sun was falling from the sky, he said to himself, "This is a sign of the Buddha's passing." When the Asuras fought with the Lord Shakra, they first all shot arrows at the sun and the moon. The evil rulers King Chie of the Xie dynasty and King Chao of the Yin dynasty in ancient China are both said to have repeatedly shot arrows at the sun, and both destroyed themselves and brought to an end their dynasties. Lady Maya dreamed that she conceived the sun and thereafter gave birth to Prince Siddhartha, who in time became the Buddha Shakyamuni. For this reason, the Buddha's name as a child was Sunseed, Japan, or Nihon, meaning the source of the sun, is so called because it is the land of the sun goddess. In light of these examples, Jikaku's dream must mean that he used his two commentaries as arrows to shoot at the sun goddess, the great teacher Dingyo, Shakyamuni Buddha, and the Lotus Sutra. I, Nichiren, am an ignorant man, and I know nothing about the sutra and treatises, but I do know this much. Anyone who would conclude from such a dream that the true word teachings are superior to the Lotus Sutra will surely in his present life destroy his nation and ruin ruin his family, and after his death will fall into the Avicii hell. We, in fact, have a piece of evidence to settle the matter. If, when Japan and the Mongol forces engaged in combat, the prayers of the true word priests are proved ineffective, are proved effective, and Japan had won victory on that account, then we might be persuaded that the true word school is worthy of respect. But at the time of the Jokyu disturbance, though a considerable number of true word priests prayed for the votary of the imperial forces and invoked curses on the forces of the Kamakura shogunate, the leader of the latter, the acting administrator Hojo Yoshitoki, emerged victorious. As a result, the retired Emperor Gotoba was exiled to the province of Oki, and his sons were exiled to the island of Sada and to another province. Such was the effect of the true word prayers for the victory. They didn't work. In the end, the true word prayers were like the cries of the fox that give him away, and the curses, as the Lotus Sutra says, rebound upon the originator. The 3,000 priests of Mount Hei were also attacked by the Kamakura troops and forced to submit. Now the Kamakura government is at the height of power. Therefore, the true word priests of Choji, Mount Hei, Onjoji, and the 7 major temples of Nara, along with those priests of the Lotus School who have forgotten the teachings of their own school and instead slander the law, have all made their way to the east of the Kanto region, where they bow their heads, bend their knees, and seek in various ways to win over the hearts of the warriors. They are in turn assigned positions as superintendents or chief officials of various temples and mountain monasteries, where they proceed to follow the same evil doctrines that earlier brought about the downfall of the imperial forces, using them to pray for peace and safety of the nation. The shogun and his family, along with the samurai who are in their service, very likely believe that as a result of such prayers, the nation will actually become peaceful and secure. But so long as they employ the services of priests who invite greater disaster by ignoring the Lotus Sutra, the nation will in fact face certain difficulties, certain destruction. When I think, top of page 574, when I think how pitiful it should be if the nation were to be destroyed, and how lamentable it would be, how lamentable would be the loss of life involved, I feel that I must risk my own life in order to make the truth of the situation clear. If the ruler desires the security of the nation, he should question the manner in which things are proceeding and try to discern the truth. But instead, all he does is listen to the calamities of others, calumnies of others, and in one way or another treat me with animosity. He's speaking of himself. In the past ages, when there were those who slandered the law, Brahma, Shakra, the gods of the sun and the moon, the 4 heavenly kings, and the deities of the earth, all of whom have sworn to defend the Lotus Sutra, would look on with disapproval, but because there was no one to proclaim the matter aloud, they would be forgiving, as one would be with an only child who misbehaves, at times pretending not to notice such slander, at times administering a mild reproof. Now that I am present to make clear the matter, however, I can only be amazed that the ruler should continue to listen to persons who slander the law. Yet he does so, and on contrary, even goes so far as to persecute the rare individual who attempts to enlighten him and rescue him from error, not for just 1 or 2 days, 1 or 2 months, or even 1 or 2 years, but for a number of years on end now. I have met with greater difficulties than the sticks and staves of Bodhisattva, never disparaging. But for a number of years on end now, I have met with greater difficulties than the sticks and staves that Bodhisattva, never disparaging, was obliged to face, and have encountered more fearful opposition than the murderous attacks inflicted by the monk realization of virtue. During this period, the two great kings, Brahma and Shakra, the gods of the sun and the moon, the four heavenly kings, the gods of stars, and the deities of the earth, have manifested their anger in various ways and again have delivered reprimands. And yet the attacks on me have only worsened. Finally, heaven in its wisdom has made the situation known to the sages of neighboring countries, enlisting them to add to the reprimands, and has caused the great evil spirits to enter the nation and deceive the people's hearts, inciting them to rebel against their own rulers. It is only reasonable to assume that, whether good or evil, the greater the portents, the greater will be the occurrences to follow. Now that we have seen huge comets of a magnitude never known before in the 2,230 or more years since the Buddha's passing, and have experienced earthquakes such as were never encountered before, such as were never encountered during that time. In China and Japan in the past, sages of outstanding wisdom and ability have from time to time appeared, but none, as an ally of the Lotus Sutra, have faced such powerful enemies within his country as have I, Nichiren. From the facts present before your very eyes, it should be apparent that Nichiren is the foremost person in the entire land of Jambudvipa. So Nichiren is making that qualification. From the facts present before your very eyes, as I've read all of this historical content to you, laid out all the legitimate doctrine that's preceded my teaching, from the facts presented before your eyes, it should be apparent that Nichiren is the foremost person in the entire land of Jambudvipa, because he's revealed Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the essence of the Lotus Sutra, for the latter day of the law. In the 700 and more years since Buddhism was first introduced to Japan, there have been 5,000 or 7,000 volumes of sutras read and 8 or 10 schools propounded. The people of wisdom who have appeared have been as numerous as rice and hemp seedlings, and those who have spread the teachings widely have been as plentiful as bamboo plants and rushes. And yet, of all the various Buddhas, there is none more highly revered, and none whose name is more widely called upon than the Buddha Amida. This practice of invoking the name of the Amida Buddha was advocated by Eshin in his work Essentials of Rebirth in the Pure Land, and as a result, 1/3 of the people in Japan became believers in the Nembutsu, the calling on the name of Amida. When Yokan wrote the 10 conditions for rebirth in the Pure Land and the rituals for the assembly of rebirth in the Pure Land, 2/3 of all the people of this country became followers of the Nembutsu. And when Honen wrote the Nembutsu chosen above all, then everyone alike in this nation became a Nembutsu devotee. Thus, those people who chant the name of the Buddha Amida these days are by no means disciples of only one person. This thing called the Nembutsu is a daimoku, or a chant, based on the 2-volumed Meditation and Amida Sutras, which are provisional Mahayana sutras. If the daimoku of provisional Mahayana sutras is widely propagated and spread abroad, it must be a prelude to the propagation of the daimoku of the true Mahayana Sutra, must it not? People who have a mind for such concerns should consider this matter carefully. If the provisional sutras are spread abroad, then the true sutra will surely be spread abroad. If the daimoku of the provisional sutras is spread abroad, then the daimoku of the true sutra will also surely be spread abroad. In all the 700 and more years from the time of the Emperor Kime to the present Emperor Go-Uda, such a thing has never seen or been heard of. Namely, a wise man who urges others to chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, and who chants it himself. When the sun rises, the stars go into hiding. When a worthy king appears, foolish kings perish. When the true sutra is spread widely, the provisional sutras will cease to circulate. And when a man of wisdom chants Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, those ignorant of it will follow after him as shadows follow a form and echoes follow a sound. There can be no room for doubt that I, Nichiren, am the foremost votary of the Lotus Sutra in all of Japan. And indeed, from this we may assume that even in China and India and throughout Jambudvipa, there is no one who can stand side by side with me. Wow. Question. The great earthquake of the Shoka area, the great comet of the Bune area, what caused these to appear? Answer. Tentai says, wise men can perceive the cause of things as snakes know the way of snakes. Question, what do you mean by this? He basically said, I know the answer to that because I'm a sage. That's what he actually answered in stating that. Now he's going to answer it more clearly. What do you mean by this statement? Answer. When Bodhisattva superior practices appeared from beneath the earth, the other bodhisattvas such as Maitreya, Manjushri, perceiver of the world's sounds, and Medicine King, though they had perceived themselves from the first 41 of the 42 levels of ignorance, though they had severed themselves from the first 41 of the 42 levels of ignorance, they had not yet severed themselves from the last one, or fundamental darkness. Hence, they were in effect ignorant persons, and consequently failed to understand that this Bodhisattva superior practices had been summoned so that he might widely propagate Nam-myoho Renge-kyo in the lifespan chapter in the latter day of the law. Question, is there anyone in Japan, China, or India who understands this manner, such as you do, such as you're saying? Answer, even the great bodhisattvas who have eradicated the illusions of thought and desire have severed themselves from the 41 levels of ignorance cannot understand such a thing. So the answer is there anyone in Japan, China, or India who understands this? And the answer is even the great bodhisattvas who have eradicated the illusions of thought and desire and severed themselves from the 41 levels of ignorance cannot understand such a thing. How then could persons who have not rid themselves of even one iota of illusion be expected to do so? Answer. But if there is no one wise person who understands why these calamities have arisen, then how can proper steps be taken to deal with them? If one does not understand the origin of an illness, though one may try to treat the sick person, the treatment will surely fail and the patient will die. Now if the people resort to prayers without understanding the basic cause of the disasters, can there be any doubt that the nation will in time face ruin? Ah, how dreadful to think of it. Answer. They say that snakes know 7 days in advance when a heavy rain is going to occur, and that crows know what lucky or unlucky events are going to take place in the course of a whole year. This must be because snakes are followers of the great dragons who make the rains fall, and crows have for a long time studied such matters of divinations. Pardon me. He continues. Now I am only an ordinary person, and therefore have no understanding of the cause of these disasters. Nonetheless, I believe I can generally instruct you concerning. Nevertheless, I believe. Okay. Now I'm only an ordinary person. Therefore, I have no understanding of the cause of these disasters. Nonetheless, I believe I can generally instruct you concerning this matter. In the time of King Ping of the Chao dynasty, persons appeared who let their hair hang down and went about naked. A court official named Xin Yu divined on the basis of this and said, within 100 years this dynasty will come to an end. In the time of King Yu of the Chao, the mountains and rivers collapsed and were destroyed and the earth shook. A courier named Po Yang, observing this, said, within 12 years our great ruler will meet with some dire happening. Now the great earthquake and the huge comet that have happened are calamities brought about by heaven, which are enraged because the ruler of our country hates nature and sides with the Zen, Nimbutsu, and True Word priests who preach doctrines that will destroy the nation. Question, how can I believe that? Answer, the Sovereign King Sutra says, because evil people are respected and favored, and good people are subjected to punishment, the stars and constellations, along with the winds and rains, all fail to move in their proper seasons. If this passage from the sutra is correct, then there can be no doubt that evil people exist in this country, and that the ruler and his ministers put their trust in such people. Moreover, there can be no doubt that a wise person exists in this country and that the ruler of the nation hates and treats him as an enemy. The same sutra also says, the deities of the heaven of the 33 gods will all feel rage in their hearts, and strange and unusual shooting stars will fall to earth. 2 suns will come out at the same time. Marauders will appear from other regions, and the people of the country will meet with death and disorder. Already in this country we have had unusual disturbances in the heavens as well as strange occurrences on earth, and the men of a foreign country have come to attack us. Can there be any doubt that the 33 heavenly gods are angry? The benevolent King Sutra states evil monks hoping to gain fame and profit in many cases appear before the ruler, the crown prince, or other princes, and take it upon themselves to preach doctrines that lead to the violation of the Buddhist law and the destruction of the nation. The ruler, failing to perceive the truth of the situation, listens to and puts faith in such doctrines. The same work also refers to a time when the sun and the moon depart from their regular courses, when the seasons come in the wrong order, when a red sun or a black sun appears, when 2, 3, 4, or 5 suns appear at the same time, when the sun is eclipsed and loses its light, or when 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 coronas appear around the sun. These passages mean that if evil monks fill the nation and deceive the ruler, the crown prince and other princes, preaching doctrines that lead to the violation of the Buddhist law and the downfall of the nation, and if the ruler and the other high officials allow themselves to be deceived by these monks and come to believe that such doctrines will in fact ensure the protection of the Buddhist law and the nation and act accordingly, then the sun and the moon will behave strangely and great winds, rains, and fires will make their appearance. Next will come internal disorder, relatives and kin turning against one another and bringing about armed revolt. Many allies and supporters of the ruler and other high officials will be struck down, and then invaders will come from other nations to attack them until they are forced to commit suicide or are captured alive or obliged to surrender. This will come about entirely because they heed doctrines that lead to the destruction of the Buddhist law and cause the downfall of the nation. The Protection Sutra says, the teachings preached by the thus come one Shakyamuni cannot be in the least bit harmed by the various devils of heaven, or by the non-Buddhists, or by evil men, or by seers who have attained the 5 transcendental powers, and yet that can be so thoroughly destroyed by those evil monks who are monks in name and appearance only, that nothing whatsoever remains of them. In this respect, though they are like Mount Sumeru, though one might gather all the grass and wood from the major world system, pile them up as fuel, and burn it for a long period of time, Mount Sumeru would not suffer the least degree of injury. But when the conflagration that marks the end of a kalpa of decline breaks out, and fire appears from within the mountain itself, then in an instant the whole mountain will be consumed by the flames, and not even ashes will remain. The lotus-like Face Sutra says, the Buddha said to Amida, it is like the case of a lion who has died. No creature that lives in the air, in the soil, in water, or on land will venture to eat the flesh of the dead lion. Only the worms that are born from the body of the lion itself will feed on the lion's flesh. In the same way, Ananda, the Buddhist teachings cannot be destroyed by outside forces. But the evil forces who exist within the body of my teachings, they are the ones who will destroy the teachings that the Buddha has labored over and worked to establish for a period of 3 great asamyak kalpas. What do these passages from the sutras mean? In the past, the Buddha Kashyapa described to King Kriki the latter day of the law of the thus come one Shakyamuni, and revealed what sort of people would destroy Shakyamuni's teachings. Evil men might appear, such as King Mihirakula, who burned all the Buddhist halls and monasteries of India and murdered all the monks and nuns of its 16 major states, or Emperor Wuzong of China, who destroyed more than 4,600 temples and pagodas in the 9 regions of China and forced 260,500 priests and nuns to return to lay life. But such men could not destroy the teachings preached by Shakyamuni Buddha. It is the priests themselves who wrap their bodies in the 3 robes permitted to them, hang a single begging bowl around their necks, store up their minds store up in their minds the 80,000 teachings, and with their mouths recite the 12 divisions of the scriptures. They are the ones who will destroy the Buddha's teachings, the teachers. It is like the case of Mount Sumeru, the Golden Mountain. Though one might gather all the grass and wood in the major world system, pile them up until they completely fill the heaven of the 4 heavenly kings, as well as the others of the 6 heavens of the world of desire, and burn them for 1 year, 2 years, 100 years, 1,000, 10,000, or 1,000,000 years, the mountain would not suffer the slightest injury. But when the time comes for the great fire that ends the kalpa of decline, a tiny flame no bigger than a beam will break out at the base of the mountain, and not only will Mount Sumeru be consumed from just that small tiny flame, but the entire major world system will likewise be destroyed. If the Buddhist predictions are to be believed, then it would appear that the Buddhist priests of the 10 schools or the 8 schools of our country will be the ones to burn up the Mount Sumeru of the Buddha's teachings. The priests of the Hinayana schools of the Dharma Analyst Treasury, Establishment of Truth and Precepts, will be the flames of anger that burn with jealous hatred toward the Mahayana schools. And priests such as Shan Wu of the True Word schools, San Chie of the Zen school, and Shan Tao of the Pure Land school are the worms that are born from the body of the lion that is the Buddha's teaching. The great teacher Dingyo, in his writings, described the eminent scholars of the 3 treatises, Dharma Characteristics, Flower Garland, and other schools of Japanese Buddhism as 6 kinds of worms. I, Nichiren, would dub the founders of the True Word, Zen, and Pure Land schools the 3 kinds of worms, and Jikaku Anan and Eshin of the Tendai school the 3 worms who devoured the lion body of the Lotus Sutra of the great teacher Dingyo. So long as Nichiren, who is working to expose the root of these great slanders against the correct teaching, is treated with animosity, the heavenly deities will withhold their light. The gods of the earth will be angered, and disturbances and calamities will appear in great numbers. You must understand that because I speak concerning the most important of the entire land, in the entire land of Jampadvipa, in the entire world, my words, you must understand that because I speak concerning the most important matter in the entire land of Jampadvipa, my words are accompanied by portents of the first magnitude. How tragic, how pitiful that all the people of Japan should fall into the great citadel of hell of incessant suffering. How unfortunate, how joyous to think that with this unworthy body, I have received in my heart the seeds of Buddhahood. Just see how it will be when tens of thousands of armed ships from the great kingdom of the Mongols come over the sea to attack Japan. Everyone from the ruler on down to the multitudes of the common people will turn their backs on all the Buddhist temples and all the shrines of the gods, and will raise their voices in chorus crying, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. They will press their palms together and say, Priest Nichiren, save us. In India, King Mihirakula was obliged to press his palms together in submission before King Baladitya. And in Japan, Taira no Munamori was forced to pay reverence to Kajiwara Tagetoki, in this accord with the principle that men of great arrogance would end by bowing before their enemies. This is in accord with the principle that men of great arrogance should end by bowing before their enemies. Those vicious and arrogant monks described in the Lotus Sutra in the beginning armed themselves with sticks and staves and used them to belabor Bodhisattva, never disparaging. But later they pressed their palms together and repented of their error. Devadatta inflicted an injury on Shakyamuni Buddha that drew blood, but when he was on his deathbed, he cried out, Namu, devotion. If only he had been able to cry Namu Buddha, devotion to the Buddha, he would have been spared the fate of falling into hell. But so grave were the deeds he had committed that he could only utter the word Namu and could not pronounce the word Buddha before he died. And soon the eminent priests of Japan will no doubt be trying to cry out, Namu Nichiren Shonin, devotion to the sage Nichiren. But most likely they will only have time enough to utter the one word Namu. How pitiful, how pitiful. They won't be able to save themselves. In the secular text it says, a sage is one who fully understands those things that have not yet made their appearance. And in the Buddhist text it says, a sage is one who knows the three existences of past, present, and future. 3 times now, I have gained distinction by having such knowledge. The first time was the first year of the Bunno era, 1260, cyclical sign Kanosara, on the 16th day of the 7th month, when I presented on establishing the correct teaching for the peace of the land to his lordship, the lay priest of Saimyoji, by the way of the lay priest Yadoya Mitsunori. At that time I said to the lay priest Yadoya, please advise his lordship that devotion to the Zen school and Nimbutsu school should be abandoned. If this advice is not heeded, trouble will break out within the ruling clan and the nation will be attacked by another country. That was the first time he responded with a refutation of the Lotus is supreme. The second was the 12th day of the 9th month of the 8th year of the Bunei era, hour of the monkey, when I said to Heino Seiman, Nichiren is the pillar and the beam of Japan. Doing away with me is toppling the pillar of Japan. Immediately you will all face the calamity of revolt within one's own domain, or strife among yourselves, and also the calamity of invasion from foreign lands. Not only will the people of our nation be put to death by foreign invaders, but many of them will be taken prisoner. All the Nimbutsu and Zen temples such as Kincho-ji, Jufuku-ji, Goku-raku-ji, Dai-butsu-den, and Shoraku-ji should be burned to the ground, and their priests taken to Yui Beach to have their heads cut off. If this is not done, then Japan is certain to be destroyed. Okay, that was the second time he did it. He did that one before he sent him off to Tatsunokuchi. All right? The third time, at the top of page 579, was the 8th day of the 4th month of the last year of the 11th year of the Bunei era, when I said to Heino Seiman, Samonojo, even if it seems that, because I was born in the ruler's domain, I follow him in my actions, I will never follow him in my heart. There can be no doubt that the Nimbutsu leads to the hell of incessant suffering, that the Zen school is the work of the heavenly devil, and the True Word school in particular is a great plague to this nation of ours. The task of praying for victory over the Mongols should not be entrusted to the True Word priests. If so grave a matter is entrusted to them, then the situation will only worsen rapidly and our country will face destruction. Heino Seimanoji Yoritsuna then asked, when do you think the Mongols will attack? I replied, the sacred scriptures do not indicate the time, but the signs show that heaven is extremely angry. It would appear that the attack is imminent. It will probably occur before this year has ended. And when he said that, 6 months later, which was before the end of the year, it happened in October. Well, this conversation he was talking to and referring to happened in April. By October, what he said happened. He says, the sacred do not indicate, but the signs show they're extremely angry. It would appear that the attack is imminent. It would probably occur before the year has ended. Yet it was not I, Nichiren, who made these 3 important pronouncements. Rather, it was in all cases the spirit of the last come one Shakyamuni that had entered into my body. It was my Buddha nature that was responding to Heino Seimanoji. Okay? Not my personal strength as better than everybody else. That's what he's trying to clarify there. Do you understand? Because that Shakyamuni, that Buddha Shakyamuni he's talking about, it's in everybody. He's really the law of the Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. That's the fundamental basis of all things. Okay, so he says, and yet it was not I, Nichiren, who made these 3 important pronouncements. Rather, it was in all cases the spirit of the thus come one Shakyamuni that had entered into my body. And having personally experienced this, I am beside myself with joy, because I am awakened now. Thus, it is the all-important doctrine of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life taught in the Lotus Sutra, but that did not exist until Tentai. Okay, so this isn't Shakyamuni's teaching from the Lotus Sutra, this 3,000 worlds. So understand, he's talking about Buddha, and he's talking about Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. This is the all-important doctrine of the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life taught in the Lotus Sutra. What does the Lotus Sutra mean when it says this reality, the true aspect of all phenomena, consists of the appearance, nature, entity, and so forth? Appearance, the first of the 10 factors of life, is the most important of them all. This is why the Buddha appeared in the world. Wise men can perceive the cause of things as snakes know the way of snakes. Little streams come together to form the great ocean, and tiny particles of dust accumulate to form Mount Sumeru. When I, Nichiren, first took faith in the Lotus Sutra, I was like a single drop of water or a single particle of dust in all the country of Japan. But later, when 2 people, 3 people, 10 people, and eventually 100, 1,000, 10,000, and 1,000,000 people came to recite the Lotus Sutra and transmit it to others, then they will form a Mount Sumeru of perfect enlightenment, an ocean of great nirvana. He's talking about Kosarufu now, so he's talking about actually the propagation of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, not the Lotus Sutra. When he says Lotus Sutra, he means Nam-myoho Renge-kyo because it's already the latter day of the law. Seek no other path by which to attain Buddhahood. Question: at the time of your second pronouncement on the 12th day of the 9th month in the 8th year of the Bunei era, when you incurred the wrath of the authorities, how did you know that if harm was done to you, rebellion would break out and the country would also be attacked by armies from abroad? The 50th volume of the Great Collection Sutra states, there may perhaps be various kings of the Kashariya class who act in a way contrary to the law, causing anguish to the voice-hearer disciples of the world-honored one. Perhaps they may curse and revile them, or beat and injure them with swords and staves, or deprive them of their robes and begging bowls and the other things that they need. Or perhaps they may restrain and persecute those who give alms to the disciples. If there should be those who do such things, then we will see to it that their enemies in foreign lands will rise up suddenly of their own accord and march against them, and we will cause uprisings to break out within their states. We will bring about pestilence and famine, unseasonable winds and rains, and contention, wrangling, and slander. And we will make certain that those rulers do not last for long, but that their nations are brought to destruction. There are many passages such as this in the sutras, but I have chosen this one because it is particularly pertinent to the times and to my own position. In this passage, the beings who are speaking are all the deities of the threefold world, including Brahma, Shakra, and the devil king of the sixth heaven, the gods of the sun and the moon, the 4 heavenly kings, and all the deities. These eminent beings appeared before the Buddha and took a vow, declaring that after the Buddha's passing in the former, middle, and latter days of the law, if there should be monks of erroneous belief who complain to the ruler concerning one of the practices, who complain to the ruler concerning one who practices the correct teaching, and if those who are close to the ruler who are loyal to him should simply accept the word of those monks because of respect for them, and without inquiring into the truth of the matter, heap abuse and slander upon this wise person, then they, the deities, would see to it that, though there may have been no reason for such an occurrence, major revolt would suddenly break out within that country. And in time, that would be the causal effect. And in time, the nation would also be attacked by another country, so that both the ruler and his state would be destroyed as a consequence of their opposition to someone practicing the correct teaching correctly. On the one hand, I am delighted to think that my prophecy shall come true, yet on the other hand, it pains me deeply that I have not committed any fault in my present existence. All I have done is to try and repay the debt I owe to my country of birth, and my endeavors to save it from disaster. That my advice was not heeded was certainly a cause of great regret to me. Not only was it not heeded, but I was summoned before the authorities, and the scroll of the 5th volume of the Lotus Sutra was snatched from the breast of my robe, and I was harshly beaten with it. In the end, I was arrested and paraded through the streets of the city. At that time, I called out, "You gods of the sun and the moon up in the sky, here is Nichiren meeting you with this great persecution. If you are not ready to risk your lives to aid me, does this mean then that I am not the votary of the Lotus Sutra? If that is so, then I should correct my mistaken belief at once. If, on the other hand, Nichiren is the votary of the Lotus Sutra, then you should send some sign of that fact to this country at once. If you do not do so, then you, the gods of the sun and the moon, and all the other deities will be no more than great liars who have deceived Shakyamuni many treasures in the Buddhas of the 10 directions, because you didn't keep your promise, your vow. Devadatta was guilty of falsehood and deception, and Kokalika was a great liar, but you deities are guilty of telling lies that are 100,000, 10,000, million times greater. Okay? So he's saying all of this on the way to Tatsunokuchi. He's saying all of this as he's renouncing two fires. I can't think of that priest's name right now off the top of my head. I'll think of it later. Okay. I had no sooner uttered these words than the nation was suddenly faced with internal strife. Since the country had fallen into grave disorder then, although I may be a mere common mortal of no social standing, so long as I uphold the Lotus Sutra, I deserve to be called the foremost great man in all of Japan at this time. Question. In the delusion that is arrogance, there are different types of arrogance, such as the 7 types, the 9 types, and the 8 types. But your arrogance is 100,000, 10,000, million times greater than the greatest degree of arrogance defined in the Buddhist teachings. The scholar Gunapata Pradha refused to bow before Bodhisattva Maitreya, and the great arrogant Brahmin made himself a dais supported by 4 legs representing the 4 sages, Maheshvara, Vishnu, and Narayana, along with Shakyamuni Buddha. Mahadeva, though only a common mortal, declared that he was an arhat, and the scholar Vilamamitra proclaimed himself foremost among all the 5 regions of India. These men were all guilty of faults that condemned them to the Avicii hell, or the hell of incessant suffering. How then do you dare to claim that you are the wisest man in the entire land of Jampadvipa? Will you not fall into hell just like the others? What a frightful thing to do. Answer. Have you really understood the meaning of the 7 types of arrogance, or the 9 types, or 8 types? The world-honored one of great enlightenment declared, I am the foremost throughout the threefold world. All the non-Buddhist leaders predicted that heaven would surely punish him immediately, or that the earth would open up and swallow him for saying such a thing. But no such thing happened. The 300 or more priests of the 7 major temples of Nara asserted that the priest Saicho, Dengyo, was an incarnation of Mahadeva, or of the iron-bellied Brahmin. Nevertheless, heaven did not punish him, but on the contrary protected him in various ways, and the earth did not open up and swallow him, but remained as hard as a diamond. The great teacher Dengyo founded a temple on Mount Hai and became the eyes of all living beings. In the end, the priests of the 7 major temples acknowledged their fault and became his disciples, and the people of the various provinces throughout the country became his lay supporters. Thus, when someone who is superior declares that he is superior, it may sound like arrogance, but that person will in fact receive great benefits because he is actually praising the law that he embraces. The great teacher Dengyo said the Tendai Lotus School is superior to other schools because of the sutra it is founded on. Therefore, pardon me, the great teacher Dengyo said that the Tendai school is superior to the other schools because of the sutra it is founded on. Therefore, in declaring its superiority, it is not simply praising it itself and disparaging others. The 7th volume of the Lotus Sutra states, just as among all sutras, just as among all the mountains, Mount Sumera is foremost, so this Lotus Sutra is likewise. Among all the sutras, it upholds the highest place. The sutras that the Buddha preached earlier, such as the Flower Garland, Wisdom, and Mahavrachana Sutras, the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra, which he preached at the same time as the Lotus Sutra, and the Nirvana Sutra, which he was to preach later, altogether amounting to 5,000 or 7,000 volumes, as well as the sutras of the land of India, the Dragon King's palace, the heaven of the four heavenly kings, the heaven of the 33 gods, and the sun and the moon, and those of all the worlds in the 10 directions, are lesser mountains, such as dirt mountains, the black mountains, the small iron encircling mountains, or the great iron encircling mountains, in comparison to this Lotus Sutra that has been brought to Japan, for it is comparable to Mount Sumeru. The 7th volume also says, a person who can accept and uphold this sutra is likewise foremost among all living beings. Let us consider what this passage means. The other sutras have their upholders. Thus, the Flower Garland Sutra is upheld by the Bodhisattva's universal worthy, Moon of Deliverance, Nagarjuna, Ashvagosha, the great teacher Fatsang, the teacher of the nation Qingliang, Empress Wu, the preceptor Shinjo, the administrative priest Robin, and Emperor Shomu. The Profound Secrets and Wisdom Sutras have as their supporters Bodhisattva's Superior Truth appearing. Bodhisattva's Superior Truth appearing. The Venerable Subhuti, the great teacher Chiaseng, the Tripitaka Master Swang Tang, the Emperors Tia Tsung and Kao Tsung, the priests Karoku and Dosho, the Emperor Kotoku. Upholding the Mahavajrachana Sutra of the True Word School are Vajrasattva, the Bodhisattva Nagarjuna Nagabodhi, King Satavahana, the Tripitaka Masters Shan Wu Wei, Qing Kong Chi, and Pukung, the Emperors Swang Tsung and Tai Tsung, Hui Kao, and the other great teachers Kobo and Jikaku. And upholding the Nirvana Sutra of Bodhisattva Kashyapa, the 52 types of beings in the Tripitaka Master Dharma Raksha, Fa Yun, and Quan Che Tzu Temple, and the 10 eminent priests, 3 from southern China and 7 from northern China, also embraced, and upholding the Nirvana Sutra of Bodhisattva Kashyapa, the 52 types of beings, the Tripitaka Master Dharma Kashyapa, period. Fa Yin of Kwangshu Temple, the 10 eminent priests, 3 from southern China and 7 from northern China, also embrace sutras other than the Lotus Sutra. Going on, second column, page 582. But if, in contrast to all these sutras, the ordinary people in the evil world of the latter age, those who do not observe a single one of the precepts and who appear to others to be Ichkantikas, firmly believe in the sutra, firmly believe, as the sutra states, that there is no path to Buddhahood outside of the Lotus Sutra, which surpasses all other sutras preached before, at the same time, or after it, then such people, though they may not appear to have a particle of understanding, are 100,000, 10,000, million times superior to those great sages who uphold the other sutras. That is what this passage from the Lotus Sutra is saying. Among the supporters of the other sutras, there are some who encourage other people to uphold such sutras temporarily as a step toward leading them to the Lotus Sutra. There are others who continue to cling to the other sutras and never move on to the Lotus Sutra. And there are still others who not only continue to uphold the other sutras, but are also intensely attached to them, that they even declare the Lotus Sutra to be inferior to such sutras. But the votaries of the Lotus Sutra should now keep the following in mind. Okay, after all of that is a preamble, he's now telling us to remember this. The Lotus Sutra says that just as among all the rivers, streams, and other bodies of water, for example, the ocean is foremost, so a person who upholds the Lotus Sutra is likewise. It goes on to say that just as among all the stars and their like, the moon, a god's son, is foremost, so a person who upholds the Lotus Sutra is likewise. Keep these words in mind. Of all the wise persons of Japan at the present time, keep these words in mind. All of the wise persons of Japan at the present time are like the host of stars, and I, Nichiren, am like the full moon. Question, is there anyone from times past who has spoken the way you have just done? Answer, the great teacher Dingyo states, one should understand that the sutras on which the other schools base their teaching are not foremost among the sutras, and those people who can uphold such sutras are not foremost among the multitude. But the Lotus Sutra, which is upheld by the Tendai Lotus School, is the foremost of all the sutras, and therefore those who can uphold the lotus are foremost among living beings. This is borne out by the words of the Buddha himself. How could it be mere self-praise? A tick that attaches itself to the tail of a qilin can race 1,000 miles in one day, and a worthless man who accompanies a wheel-turning king can circle in an instant about the 4 continents of the world. Who would question the truth of such matters? Dingyo's words, how could it be mere self-praise, should be kept in mind. If what it says is correct, then a person who upholds the Lotus Sutra, just as it teaches, must be superior to the King Brahma and more worthy than the Lord Chakra. If you have asuras who help you, you can lift and carry even Mount Sumeru. If you have dragons in your employ, you can drain all the water in the ocean until it runs dry. The great teacher Dingyo says, those who praise him will receive blessings that will pile up as high as Mount Calm and Bright, while those who slander him will be committing a fault that will condemn them to the hell of incessant suffering. He's talking about Dingyo, is actually referencing me. And the Lotus Sutra states, if this person should slander a sutra such as this, or on seeing those who read, recite, copy, and uphold this sutra should despise, hate, envy, or bear grudges against them. He's talking about those I Nichiren read, recite, copy, and uphold the sutra, right? So again, those who bear grudges against me, when his life comes to an evil end, will enter the Avicii hell. You can't slander me as a true Buddha and not have bad karma as a result, just like the people that slandered never disparaging. If these golden words of Shakyamuni Buddha, the Lord of Teachings, are true, if the testimony of their truth given by many treasures Buddha is not false, and if the sign of ascent given by the Buddhas of the 10 direction when they extended their tongues is to be trusted, then there can be no doubt that all living beings in Japan at the present time are destined to fall into the hell of incessant suffering for rejecting me Nichiren. That, it doesn't say that, but that's what he's alluding to. The 8th volume of the Lotus Sutra says, in the latter ages, if there are those who accept, uphold, read, and recite this sutra, their wishes will not be in vain, and in this present existence they will gain the reward of good fortune. It also says that if there is anyone who offers alms to them and praises them, then in this present existence he will have manifest reward for it. In these 2 passages are the words, in this present existence they will gain the reward of good fortune, and in this present existence he will have manifest reward for it. These 2 statements in their Chinese original each comprise 8 characters. If these 16 characters are meaningless, and if Nichiren does not receive some great reward in this present life, then these golden words of the Thus Come One will be in the same category as the empty lies of Devadatta, and the testimony of many treasures Buddha that guaranteed their truth will be no different from the baseless assertions of Kokalika. Then none of the people who slander the correct teaching will ever be condemned to the Avicii hell, and the Buddhas of the 3 existences will not exist. But could such a thing be possible? As everything that the sutras say is supposed to be, not be? He says, no. Therefore, I say to you, my disciples, we're finally to the last of the Gosho. So he's saying, could any of this actually be? No, because the sutra says it cannot be. And my life has already validated that everything that's in the sutras is all correct. It's all happening the way the sutras say it will happen. And Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is the only correct teaching for the latter day. And you're in the latter day. And disregard the expedient means of the teachings that have preceded the latter day. They were waiting for my advent to qualify the correct teaching for Mappo, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Therefore, I say to you, my disciples, going to page 584, try practicing as the Lotus Sutra teaches, exerting yourselves without begrudging your lives. Test the truth of Buddhism now, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Question. In the Lotus Sutra, we find this passage, we care nothing for our bodies or our lives, but are anxious only for the unsurpassed way. And the Nirvana Sutra says, for example, it is like a royal envoy skilled in discussion and clever with expedient means who, when sent on a mission to another land, would rather, even though it cost him his life, in the end conceal none of the words of his ruler. Wise persons too do this. In the midst of ordinary people, and without begrudging their lives, those who are wise should without fail proclaim the thus come one's prized teaching from the correct and equal sutras of the great vehicle. That is, all living beings possess the Buddha nature. But under what circumstances should one be prepared to sacrifice one's life and safety? I would like to explain to you the matter to me. This is a question. But under what circumstances should one be prepared to sacrifice one's life and safety? I would like you to explain the matter to me in detail. Very important. This is the conclusion of the Gosho. That was the last question. Answer. When I first embarked upon the Buddhist practice, I supposed that the statement, we care nothing for our bodies or lives, meant receiving the imperial command and traveling to China the way men like Dingyo, Kobo, Jikaku, and Chisho did, or that it meant setting out from China as the Tripitaka master Xuanzang did, traveling all the way to India, dying 6 times in the attempt and striving again with each rebirth. Or I thought that it meant throwing away one's life the way the boy Stone Mountains did in order to learn the second half of a verse, or burning one's arms as an offering for 72,000 years the way Bodhisattva Medicine King did. But if we go by the passage of Scripture that you have quoted, these are not the kind of thing that is meant. As to this passage, in other words, the passage of Scripture that was quoted in the question that precedes this. As to this passage in the sutra, we care nothing for our bodies or lives. The sutra earlier describes the 3 types of enemies who will vilify and attack one with swords and staves, and in all likelihood deprive one of life and body, which will also be encountered by the bodhisattvas of the earth. And to understand the passage in the Nirvana Sutra that speaks of carrying out one's duty even though it costs him his life, like the vow of the bodhisattva of the earth. We should look at the passage later on and and to understand the passage in the Nirvana Sutra that speaks of carrying out one's duty even though it costs him his life, we should look at the passage later on in the same sutra that says, there are Ichkantikas, or persons of incorrigible disbelief. They pretend to be arhats, living in deserted places and speaking slanderously of the correct and equal sutras of the great vehicle. When ordinary people see them, they all suppose that they are true arhats and speak of them as great bodhisattvas. Speaking of the third of the 3 types of enemies, the Lotus Sutra says, or there will be forest-dwelling monks wearing clothing of parched rags and living in retirement. They will be respected and revered by the world as though they were arhats who possess the 6 transcendental powers. And the Parinirvana Sutra says, there are also Ichkantikas who resemble arhats but who commit evil deeds. These passages from the sutra speak of powerful enemies of the correct teaching. Such enemies are to be found not so much among evil rulers and evil ministers, among non-Buddhists and devil kings, or among monks who disobey the precepts. Rather, they are those great slanderers of the law who are to be found among the eminent monks who appear to be upholders of the precepts and men of wisdom. The great teacher Miolo, speaking of such men, says, the third group is the most formidable of all. This is because the second and third ones are increasingly harder to recognize for what they really are. The 5th volume of the Lotus Sutra says, the Lotus Sutra is the secret storehouse of the Buddhists, the thus come ones. Among the sutras, it holds the highest place. In this passage, we should note the words, it holds the highest place. The phrase comprises 4 characters in the original. If we are to believe this passage, then we must say that the votary of the Lotus Sutra is one who proclaims the Lotus Sutra to stand supreme above all other sutras. Let us suppose now that there are many people who are held in great respect by the ruler, and that these people claim that there are sutras superior to the Lotus Sutra, disputing with the votary of the Lotus Sutra on this point. They enjoy the trust and support of the ruler and his ministers, while the votary of the Lotus Sutra is a person of low station and humble learning. Therefore, the whole nation joins in heaping abuse on him. If at that time he conducts himself in the manner of Bodhisattva never disparaging, or the scholar Bhadraruchi, and continues to assert the superiority of the Lotus Sutra, he will almost certainly lose his life. To practice with such resolve in the face of this threat is the most important thing of all. Do not begrudge your life. Now I, Nichiren, am confronting just such a situation, as we should too. Though I am a humble person, I have proclaimed that the great teachers Kobo and Jikaku, the Tripitaka masters Shanwei and Changqing Chi and Pukung and others of their kind are potent enemies of the Lotus Sutra, and that if the words of the sutra are to be trusted, they have without doubt fallen into the hell of incessant suffering. To proclaim such a thing as this is a very grave step. It would be easier to walk naked into a raging fire, easier to take up Mount Sumeru in one's hands and toss it away, easier to hoist a great stone on one's back and walk across the ocean than to do what I have done. To establish the correct teaching in this country of Japan is indeed a difficult thing. If Shakyamuni Buddha, the Lord of Teachings of the Pure Land of Eagle Peak, many treasures Buddha of the world of treasure purity, the Buddhas of the 10 directions who are Shakyamuni's emanations, the Bodhisattvas as numerous as the dust particles of 1,000 worlds who sprang up out of the earth, Brahma, Shakra, the gods of the sun and the moon, and the 4 heavenly kings do not conspicuously or inconspicuously give me their protection and lend me aid, then they will never know a single day or a single hour of peace and safety. The end of the treatise on, the selection of time. Thank you.
Thank you. It's 3 parts.
How long was it?